everyone, and thank you for tuning in to another episode of Behavior Bites. We are here today with Brenda Gentry, owner of Mutt Luck here in Richmond. And Brenda is one of the pet professionals that we are just so fortunate to have here in the area. Brenda offers science-based, Lima-focused, force-free approaches in her training, including board and train services, which are really hard to find sometimes. Her background is in linguistics and communication, some very, very helpful fields when you're trying to navigate the dog-human relationship, and has been actively involved with dogs since 2003. And in that time, I know you fostered hundreds of dogs and puppies. You have a wide range of experience when it comes to different breeds, different behavioral concerns. And you have quite a crew at your house, and your house is like really cool. And like, I mean, I've never been there, but just from what I've seen, your dog setups are so neat, such an awesome place. So I want to talk all about what you do. In any case, thank you so much for being here, Brenda. I'm really excited to talk with you.
I'm excited. I've been looking forward to it.
Awesome. So we were kind of looking right at what should we talk about, what topic, and we landed on behavioral euthanasia. And it was kind of, you know, that kind of like half joking, like, do we want to take on that topic? And of course the answer was yes. This is a topic that a lot of folks shy away from, or really, of course, don't want to consider. Most will not have to consider. Most dog owners will not have to consider this their dogs, but for those who do, they are certainly not alone by any stretch of the imagination. And I think it's a really complicated topic that we're going to try to start talking about in the amount of time. So you have so much experience, you know, as we've touched on, in placing dogs and helping to find appropriate homes. So let's start kind of back there. Someone's looking for a dog, they come to you when you're matching an individual dog with a specific person or family.
Sure. I think that in an ideal situation where someone is looking for a dog, they are able to be really honest about what they want out of a relationship with a dog, because people want different things. You know, some people do want an active dog. They want a dog to take out hiking and to take out in public. So they need a dog who's super social, who has that energy level. And so, you know, you have to be able to explain to them, well, maybe, you know, maybe a basset hound isn't for you if you're going to be, you know, if you're going to be hiking 30 miles on the weekend. Not to say there aren't some very athletic basset hounds, there are, but, you know, this is a person who might really honestly be better suited for the husky that everybody thinks they want, that most people don't really want.
Right.
Yeah. So I think that being able to sort of ask those questions about their lifestyle, and also have the knowledge of dogs in general, but also specific breeds, breed tendencies, you know, so that if people tell you, well, we're kind of looking at this dog because we like the way it looks, and, you know, yeah, maybe that dog looks great, but maybe it's not suitable. You know, maybe it's not suitable for your house that doesn't have a fenced yard, or maybe it's not a suitable companion for an apartment. So just, you know, sort of being able to make those matches, and being able to tell somebody in a kind and non-judgmental way, like, you know, maybe this isn't the right dog for you, and maybe you should look at other dogs. And it often happens that you know, people haven't even considered. They sort of get their idea in their head of what they want their dog to be like or look like, and they've never even actually considered. So if you can offer them other options and other solutions, then that's the best, you know, first step in making a good match. And knowing a little bit about their background of dog ownership, knowing what they're prepared to deal with. Somebody who's had dogs for 25 years is in a much different position than someone who just moved out and bought a house that has new white carpet and has never owned a dog in their life, those people need very different dogs. So there are a lot of variables involved in making that match. And it's hard sometimes telling people, it's hard to learn how to tell people no. I ran a nonprofit rescue for a long time. And so having homes that are great homes for a dog, but maybe not this dog, figuring out the way to sort of, manage telling them that as well, to sort of finesse that and find them the right fit from the beginning.
And that can absolutely be such a tough conversation. And especially as the responsible one, like running the rescue, I'm sure that's a conversation that you've had quite a bit. To say, there's nothing wrong with you and your family or your living situation or your environment. There's no judgment on that. And there's no judgment on this or on the dog either. Because the dog's great, but this isn't a good fit. The environment and the dog's individual self, maybe their breed, that's all going to clash. And you may end up seeing behavioral problems because of that might not occur in the correct environment.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So hopefully folks are in a position where they're able to be proactive, but sometimes these thoughts don't come to us until later, or we find the dog, so what happens when the match isn't working out? So let's say that someone has a dog and for whatever reason it's not working. Perhaps there are some behavioral concerns, maybe due to the environment, maybe due to it being a bad match, or maybe for other reasons. Maybe the dog is having a hard time, that they would probably have those difficulties, but it's just not something this family is able to address. So what are the options for, a lot of folks can run into that. I think there's a lot of conversation around there of like, once you have a dog, you have to keep the dog, even if it's making everyone miserable or it's not safe. And it's just not true. We don't encourage folks to stay like that. So what are our options?
So yeah, I think that's really important to address, that sort of myth that I obviously want people to be committed to their dogs. I mean, 100% I want that. But I think it's important for people to understand that being committed to a dog doesn't necessarily mean keeping it. Because like you said, sometimes these dogs are in situations where the dog is majorly unhappy, maybe can't achieve happy in the situation they're in, or is not safe. And sometimes those dogs could be safe in a different environment. Sometimes they can't. That's a different issue. But so I think it's important, if people find themselves, struggling with their dog, that they reach out to a professional. If the dog is, I always say, like, if your dog is annoying you, reach out to a trainer. If you're afraid of your dog, reach out to a veterinary behaviorist. They're different. There are things that are,
I love that
are training issues, and there are things that are way beyond training,
Yes.
So I think that working with professionals to really pinpoint like what you have going on, and people who can really address and be honest with you about the potential your dog has in the current environment, for better or for worse. What, these are the improvements that could be attained, that you could see. And these are the liabilities that you're looking at if you keep this dog in this environment. I think it's very important to sort of let people know that, like, what the best is going to be and what the worst is going to be, and be realistic about that. If you have a dog at a home who's not comfortable with small children who live in the home, it doesn't necessarily mean that dog won't be successful in a home with a retired couple who don't have children around. There may be another option. Yes. There are more variables. It's rarely that simple, but So I think that people have to look at you have to kind of consider where you got your dog in the first place. If your dog came just from an animal shelter, you just went to the county pound and got a dog, then there may not be really much recourse. It's up to you to make a decision about the final outcome of the dog. You may have the option of returning it to the shelter, which, if the dog is a danger to your family, is perfectly viable, is a perfectly viable option. Or, you may be able to reach out to rescue groups, especially if the dog is a specific breed. You may be able to find a rescue group who is better equipped to deal with the needs of that pet. Say you did go to the shelter and you adopted a husky, and you've never had a dog before, and you live in an apartment and you work 14 hours a day, and now suddenly everything is a disaster, then you may be able to find a breed specific rescue who is able to find a foster and adoptive home that can meet the needs of the dog. And there shouldn't be shame in that. People don't know what they don't know. And so the average person who goes to a shelter or even a breeder looking for a dog may have very limited knowledge of what dog ownership even is. So if they already have the dog and weren't fully educated before, then those resources of a breed specific rescue, maybe not even in placing the dog, maybe just in being able to teach them how to better care for the dog, how to better meet the dog's needs. And if the dog did come from a breeder, most breeders, again, will offer that sort of ongoing support in how to care for the dog, how to meet the dog's needs, and should be willing to take the dog back if it doesn't work out. And oftentimes may have a home lined up for the dog, because there are a lot of people who want a specific breed of dog, but they don't want a puppy. And so that's a need that breeders have a hard time meeting, right? Because they don't usually have adult dogs. So sometimes it's really not a big deal to let your breeder place an adult dog that is not working out in your home.
Yeah. And I think, what you're saying is so important in kind of going through those options, because I'm sure you've seen this. I know I've worked with people who, and we kind of talked before, there's so many different rabbit holes we could be going down here.
Sure.
So it's very hard to, I've had folks who have had dogs who are doing behaviorally very abnormal things for whether I'll say, perhaps this dog has come from a breeder, and I'll say, well, have you reached out to your breeder? This is important information. Your breeder will want to know
right.
this. They'll say, well, no, we're so worried the breeder, there's all this concern that they will be blamed because they left with, a perfectly normal puppy, or the other puppies. Right. And that idea too of if you got your dog from the shelter or the rescue, that idea of like, sending them back there, it's this big deep cliff you're going off of, and
right.
guilt, when really, what I'm hearing you say is the conversation needs to be, a little bit more broad than that, where we can say, oh, this is actually the best case scenario for everyone involved.
Right.
And these places are here to help you and support you to different degrees, but reach out and ask for support and ask for help. Reach out to a trainer, like you said, wherever you are in the process, the sooner you reach out for that support, the better. Sure. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so it isn't working out. The person has an option on the table. They can reach out to where they got the dog from originally. Now we're kind of narrowing our focus, right, and talking about dogs where the options are, right, we've decided the dog is not a good fit for this home. Maybe support, you've thought about, what role the environment has played, and if you're meeting the dog's needs, if, are they physically healthy? Are they mentally enriched? Is this a matter of a dog not getting a specific kind of need met due to their breed, or just,
Right.
on the table, we have the options of the dog going back to the breeder or shelter or rescue. We can rehome them, or in some cases, we see behavioral euthanasia come onto the table. And that's when we kind of, for those listening, narrow our lens a little more. Not every dog who's is going to have BE on the table. But for the dogs that do, what factors, or this is such a huge question, what factors come into play when someone is trying to make that decision, and who makes that decision?
So as trainers, it's never our place to recommend behavioral euthanasia. So I'm not ever going to come out and tell someone, even if I'm thinking it really hard, that you should consider behavioral euthanasia for this dog.
Yeah.
I just try to give them all of the, I open the conversation with, what's going to happen, or what do you envision happening? For example, if you continue to own this dog and he's in your house and such and such situation happens, what do you think the dog is going to do? And what is your liability? What is your liability if this situation occurs? So maybe you have a dog who really doesn't care for children. We can work with the dog and get him more desensitized to your own children, and possibly get him to a point where he's very safe and managed around your children. But for example, let's say the dog in question has a level 3 bite to one of their children in the house, and the child is not, permanently disfigured from the bite, maybe is not even scared of the dog. Let's say it's a small dog. It's a little fluffy dog. But, I try to explain it, but ultimately, your children will have friends over to the house. So what is that management going to look like? And is it fair to ask your children to manage the dog? It's not, and it's not fair to ask children, obviously, to manage a dog, but just sort of explaining to them those liabilities. And that's not maybe the best example if we're talking about a behavioral euthanasia case, but maybe that looks like a dog who has some severe resource guarding that's not specific to any certain item and is rather unpredictable especially for just a lay person who went and adopted a dog from the shelter, right? That's too much to ask somebody to care for. And that specific dog is probably not going to benefit from a different environment. It's probably going to, that behavior is not being exacerbated by, I don't know, it's the behavior is not caused by the environment. It's just sort of inherent in the dog, right? So the dog is not going to go somewhere else and magically be normal. Yes. I think that some people have the idea that if the dog has a behavior problem, like, it has to be something we did. It has to be something we did wrong. Mm-hmm. It definitely does not have to be anything you did wrong. It definitely does not have to be. So anyway, so I try to talk to them about the possibilities, the liabilities, what could potentially go wrong, what our potential successes might be, and what management is going to look like long term. Because anytime you're working really with a serious aggression case, anxiety case, the training is important, but management is everything. And also, management always fails, right? There's always going to be a management fail. So what is that? So what does that look like? And what is the quality of life for the people in the house if they are just like bending their entire universe to accommodate a dog who is honestly miserable, right? If they're displaying these behaviors. So all of that said, those are typically the conversations that I have with people. I think there's also a myth, there are a lot of myths floating around dog book. But we see the posts about the people who bring their old dog to the shelter because they got a puppy, or brought their dog into the vet because it barks too much, so they want the dog put to sleep. And the fact of the matter is those things are not, they're not reality. I'm not saying that it's never happened, but the average person, the average dog owner struggles with the decision about euthanasia when their pet is terminally ill, let alone when they're considering it for a behavior problem. So I implore everyone, if a client brings up euthanasia to you because of the behavior issue, believe them. Believe that there is a serious, serious problem, because nobody makes that decision lightly. Nobody who brings that up to you hasn't lost sleep over it, hasn't cried tears over it, doesn't think about it, 15 minutes out of every waking hour. So, and I mean, I tell you that from personal experience as well. Believe it. At that point, if somebody has brought it up and has asked me sort of my opinion, I'm always clear that it's a very personal decision. Only the owner of the dog can decide what they're able to manage and live with and medicate and train. But I'm also clear to them that I support them whichever decision they make. Up to and including, I've had not many clients who've done behavioral euthanasia, but I will go with them if that's what they need for the support. It's important, and it's really important for me personally, when it has happened, to do a lot of follow-up in the days after, to check in, little text messages. Are you guys doing okay? Just to be there for them, just to be there to listen to them.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of sort of emotional work. But I think it's important. I think it's important to support people who've made that decision. I also, at the time that they tell me that they're considering euthanasia, or they've decided on euthanasia, I do also, of course, tell them that it's something that they also need to discuss with their veterinarian. People are worried that their vet will try to talk them out of it. I will say that is sometimes the case, but I don't think it's usually the case. Because usually the people who are this invested in their dog also have a close relationship with their veterinarian, so their veterinarian understands as well, and can make the process, as easy and unstressful as possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Going back to that team support. Yeah, I agree completely. That's my experience as well, that with folks who have had to make this decision, they're considering the ongoing risk. They're, so it's like you said, is it children at risk? Is it, our neighbors? Right. If someone leaves a door open, right. Who is at risk in the family, right. In society? Right. And then, planning for a management failure. Okay, that's going to happen. What does that look like? What is our worst case scenario? What right. is our best case scenario in the event of a management failure? The dog's quality of life. they have usually, at this point tried, Trish McMillan and Sue Alexander have that, I can't remember which, but one of them has said, you don't have to try everything. You just, you try what's realistic for you to try.
Sure.
And I think about that, and that's, that's another way of saying everything though. You give these are people who are giving everything they have to give to try to
Right.
balance themselves and society and you're spot on. I think that all we should be offering those people is support and
Right.
It's such a difficult decision for folks to have to make. And I know personally, I've had, it's not uncommon, I think, to have clients who really want the permission to do it. And
absolutely.
I could never put myself in your shoes because you're in a different environment with a different family with a different dog. Then all I can do is validate that yes, you're doing the things and give you my honest professional opinion and certainly support them every step of the way. So I love that validation that folks should reach out to their trainer, to a veterinary behaviorist, to a vet, their regular vet, and have these conversations, look for that support. Absolutely. It's such a deep topic that I feel like we could continue talking about.
Yeah.
We've really just scratched the surface, but I'm glad that we were able to have this conversation. I think it's really timely. This will come out next week, but in the last couple weeks, that Slate article came out. Description for anyone who may not have read it, but I know that it really kind of stirred up some conversation in the general population around behavioral euthanasia. Again, someone very bravely shared their story. So I hope that when people are listening to this, that, if they do happen to find themselves in a situation currently, I think that's going to be a very small portion, but I hope this is helpful. But also, I really hope that this is helpful for anyone who may be friends with or professionally working with, from a dog standpoint, or just friends or family with someone who is has had to consider that decision in the past, or if that's something that's on the table for them and they've chosen to confide in you, whether you're their neighbor or their veterinarian or their trainer, or that this really illuminates too that it is a heavy decision that people take very seriously, and that these are not easy decisions. I think it's Chris Pockle says, when you're looking at these decisions, continue training and management, rehome / rescue, or euthanasia, they're all hard decisions. It's just which one makes sense for your family, and that's why the dog owner is the only one who can decide that. So I hope that this conversation in itself provides some support.
And I want to add quickly to, in addition to the Slate article that came out, there was also a recent situation, a rescue group actually near us. I think they're in Virginia Beach. I can't remember the name of the group, but Animal Aid Society, I think made the decision. They had 4 long-term dogs with serious behavior issues, and they made the decision to euthanize those dogs. And I know they got a lot of messages of support, but I'm sure they got other messages as well. But I think it's important to if you're looking for a dog, if you're looking to adopt a dog, to really vet your rescue groups, because there are certainly rescue groups that would never consider behavioral euthanasia. Sue Sternberg recently commented on a post that the no-kill shelters have actually become you-kill shelters. Mm-hmm. And so some of these rescue groups are literally outsourcing behavioral euthanasia to their adopters, which is unconscionable. I mean, just really. So I think that I just think that rescue groups and shelters need to be really also far more cognizant about the dogs they're putting out into society, because there is certainly a duty to safety, And many of the people who are getting rescue and shelter dogs are not super experienced dog owners. Just because somebody doesn't have another dog in their home doesn't mean they're prepared to deal with serious dog aggression. Those are not the same. Those are not the same thing.
Yes.
And so it's sort of, I just strongly feel that it's your responsibility if you're placing dogs to place the very best dogs you can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And thank you so much for mentioning Animal Aid Society. If you're listening to this podcast or this, whatever we're doing, YouTube, Instagram, if you're listening to our video, and you want to go leave some love on their page, they have been getting a lot of backlash. So if you just want to, drop some heart emojis or some words of encouragement to them, I'm sure that would be much appreciated. I have seen firsthand shelters that, not here in Virginia, but I have seen shelters that do not euthanize for any reason, and it's sad.
It's sad, and honestly, it's sad. It's sad for the dogs who are often warehoused sometimes for years. 3 or 4 years living basically in a concrete box with maybe a 10-minute walk a day. I mean, that's horrible. I don't want that to happen to any of my dogs.
Yeah. An ethical rescue and ethical shelter is taking into account everyone's well-being. And so I think that's so important, and that stigma around like no kill shelters, and that's a whole other rabbit hole, but folks could, there seems to be a significant misunderstanding, one, of what that means, and how shelters generally work. And so I guess we'll talk about it. So 90%, 90% or less.
Yeah, you have to place 90% or more of the pets that come in. And in different shelters, some shelters work around that by only taking in very adoptable dogs in the first place, which they get a lot of flack for, but honestly is fine, right? Take in the dogs that you're comfortable placing, that you can back up, that you can easily take back at any point in their life, because that's what responsible sheltering and rescuing is.
Yes.
So I think that what happens is that sometimes municipal shelters are pushed to be no kill, and maybe that's not realistic under those, under that 90% guideline. Maybe it's not realistic. So then maybe that shelter is feeling obligated to place marginal dogs. There's another great article out there, The Perils of Placing Marginal Dogs. That's worth looking up and reading.
Yeah. Okay, good. Yeah. I've heard Trish McMillan talk about, the effect that it has on the rescue and shelter world when dogs with severe behavioral problems are adopted out and families have to deal with the fallout, whether that's behavioral or something else, and tragedies happen.
Yeah, well, we think about the stigma that's placed on puppy mills, right? Everybody knows, don't get a dog from a puppy mill because they're not well taken care of, because they're not healthy, they're not health tested. Everybody, that's pretty common, I think, pretty common knowledge. But then suddenly when they're shelter dogs, that goes out the window, so I think that it's the same. I just think that people should be educated to go out and get the best dog that they can get, that's the best fit and is going to have the longest, happiest, healthiest life with them, whether that's a shelter dog or a dog from a responsible breeder. Yeah,
absolutely. And when shelters and rescues are adopting out dogs that are behaviorally sound, people who adopt are like, yeah, I had a really good experience. I had
a great shelter dog. I've always had shelter dogs. They're fantastic.
Yes.
And and the truth of the matter is most shelter dogs are fantastic. I mean, I have some fantastic shelter dogs right here. Yeah, most dogs are fine, no matter where they come from. Most dogs are fine.
Yes, yes. And I think that's also something, to really drive home to folks, is that the need for behavioral euthanasia is, do we want to say rare? Is rare a little too strong of a word? But it's certainly not the norm.
It's not no, it's definitely not the norm. It's definitely not, yeah, it's not the norm. I would say, like, I don't know. I mean, I can't put a percentage on it, right? But it's not a common thing. And
Right.
it shouldn't be a common thing.
Yes. But if you have experienced this, it doesn't mean that you are certainly not alone, right? So it's kind of that
Right.
like two-way message. Most folks are not going to need to consider this, but if you have needed to in the past or ever do in the future, it does not mean, there's so many factors at play. It does not mean
Right.
that you've necessarily broken the dog.
Right.
Yeah. Brenda, thank you so much for this
Yeah,
conversation.
no problem.
It's been absolutely amazing. I hope you'll come back and deal with Zoom with me some more so we can have more
Maybe.
maybe. Move to like
Maybe.
so before we go, tell people, leave them with kind of a parting message, a call to action. What would you like them to do with their newfound information, and where can we find you?
Well, I guess my actionable item is that I would like for people to go leave some love for Animal Aid Society, because they did a hard thing and they did the right thing. Yeah. As for me, I board dogs from home. I do what I call weird boarding. I take care of a lot of dogs that don't do well in a traditional boarding setting. They're sensitive, they're quiet, they have reactivity issues. And so I'm well set up here to manage that in a quiet, calm, comfortable environment. I do offer board and train. What I hope sets me apart in boarding and training, other than just using positive reinforcement methods, is that I do try to cater to the dog's whole being of wellness, so they do get training, but they also get a lot of enrichment. They get decompression time. They get to hike and be outside and go swimming and play with other dogs if that's appropriate. So yeah, to just have a traditional or non-traditional sort of summer camp experience that caters to them as an individual.
I love that so much. Guys, you don't even know how much of a gem Brenda is. Maybe you do. Maybe we're talking to people that already know how amazing you are. But if you don't, if this is your first intro to Brenda, like what you're offering here in Richmond and what you're doing, doing so well is something that's hard to find. So I encourage folks, I send folks to you, but I encourage anyone watching this video to, if that sounds like something that your dog could benefit from, to reach out to Brenda, and I'll have your website also in the description, of course, in your Facebook.
Okay.
Awesome. Brenda, thank you so much.
All right. Thank you.